Hello, welcome to Generally Speaking. Today is Wednesday, April 29th, 2026. Nice to see you all again. Maybe it's your first time here. Nice to see you for the first time. Actually, nice for you to see me because I really can't see you. All right, so what's in the news? Iran strikes did more damage than was reported. Oh, what's new with that? Nobody reports the damage they're getting. They always report the damage that the enemy's getting. They always have 1,000 people died. On our side, 2 people, sprained a wrist. Nothing new on that account. Meanwhile, the Pentagon is requesting another $200 billion, and this is upsetting some legislatures. Why? Not because they're requesting $200, but because they're not saying why. Well, obviously they want the money. Yeah, well, how about a little bit more than I just want the money? They're not saying what happened to the equipment that they had. Well, obviously they used it up. Maybe they didn't, right? And they're not reporting that. They're not saying what they need it for. Oh, we can assume they want to build, more bullets. But you don't know. That's a lot of these monies, they disappear, right? Hey, we all know that. So, hey, even if they tell us, we're still not going to know where it goes. And they're not going to say what they're going to do with it, why we need it, what we're going to do with it, where it went, what happened. Not going to tell you anything. And why are they upset about this? Because that's not normal procedure. Normally, there is a little, discussion behind closed doors. The appropriate committees, they hear from the Pentagon, and we got to fix a battleship. A couple of planes lost a wing. We got to repair that. We need some more, food. That we hear the food isn't so good for the soldiers. Whatever. But now they're not doing anything. They're just saying, give us the money. Just give us the money. Trust us. So they're getting upset, the legislatures. They're getting upset. But since they're Republican legislatures, it won't go any further than we got upset, but okay, you can have it. And believe me, if it's all a matter of numbers, and if the Republicans have it, the Pentagon will get that money. I have no doubt whatsoever. Even though, there are some that, starting to think that they don't like the whole, war thing going on. So maybe not. It should be interesting to see what happens. All right, listen. If you liked this much so far, please give me a like, subscribe, and hit the notify bell, and make a comment. If you like it, leave a like. If you didn't like it, leave a don't like. Make a mark. Show you were here. All right, let's go to Iran is proposing an exit to this war, and they got a 3-point program. They had put out, 10 points that they are going to insist on for, the end of all this. But now they're coming out with a generalized three-point plan, and 3 phases. The first is, let's just stop dropping bombs on everybody. We won't drop any on you. You don't drop any on us. And we make that with some kind of assurance, not just say so. I guess we'll say so with, pinkies crossed and say, I promise. I don't know. But that's one first step, do that, which, if you ask me, well, that's the end of the war, isn't it? You said you stop bombing. Well, it's a first step. All right, so what's the next step? Discussion about control of the Hormuz Straits. We'll have some discussions with that, and it will include Oman, which is on the other side of the Strait of Hormuz. I guess Iran is sharing any tolls with Oman. That would be number 2. And then number 3 would be discussion of Iran's nuclear program. The uranium they have, they enrich it. They want to keep it enriching, for their, nuclear program, so they can keep their nuclear reactors delivering electricity, and they're willing to say we won't enrich it up to the point where you can make bombs, right? So 3-phase program. No word on that whatsoever, just the fact that they put that out and not how it was received or anything like that. All right, let's get out of wars and let's go to politics in the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom, and focusing particularly on one region of the UK known as Wales. Wales is typically thought of as a country, even though it's a part of the UK. The UK lets them, for the most part, do everything that a country would do by themselves, except with some of those extreme things like military, foreign affairs, sorts of things. So Wales. What about Wales? Well, Wales is the home of the coal power that the British relied on when coal was first growing and growing and growing, powering the battleships, powering industry. Coal was king, as they would say, and coal started its heyday in Wales. And another thing that started in Wales was the abuse of the workers, which, of course, abuse of workers was happening everywhere. But since the coal industry was so important and these workers were so important, they got together, formed unions, and it was like where the Labour Party first started in the UK, home of the Labour Party. It's been so strong in Wales that it has been there essentially forever, except now it looks like it might not be there much longer. Why? Because the Labour Party has essentially become the opposite of what it started out as. It's now pro-corporate, pro-big money. It's labor in name only. And just to show how far it's gone in the wrong direction, some midterms, by-elections, I don't know what they're called right now, but in Wales, everyone is seeing the handwriting on the wall. It looks like Labour is going to lose. Now, I was watching an interview where someone said, we've seen this before, it looks like they're going to lose, and then they come out ahead anyway. But this time is different. I think this time is different. And if they lose in Wales, it's pretty much a done deal that in the UK general elections, Labour will be out. And the Greens, who were relegated to like nothing. They had become like one blade of green glass. Now they're becoming a whole forest. The Greens are really becoming the big force currently in the UK. And that's a good thing, I think, because they're more left-wing, and we've had a lot of right-wing inroads going all over the place. This country, Trump and these Republicans, it's all right-wing. France had a right-wing party. Germany's got a strong right-wing party. Even Canada. Canada was almost going to go right-wing. They had a person running there, Polyev, I think his name was, and he would have won. He was, headed to victory, a right-wing party, except that Trump started to talk about Canada should be the 51st state, and we're going to put tariffs on Canada, started bad-mouthing Canada left, right, and center, and such a reaction against it that they voted for someone not on the left exactly, a more centrist person, more left, but a centrist person. But the right-wing party, I'm saying, they had strong inroads in Canada, and then France, and Germany. And, of course, we got Hungary with Orban. It's nice to see that the Green Party in England is making looks like going to be the big guy on the block soon, and it's nice to see what happened to Orban, lost in Hungary, but it's not so great because the guy taking his place isn't any kind of left-wing radical by any means. Was from the same party Orban was in, but maybe he's a little bit more left in some little smidge. I'll take anything at this point. All right, so again, if you can, please like, subscribe, and notify. Hit that notify button so you can see me coming up again. All right, so there weren't too many news things, so I just picked up some other things that I randomly come across while I have nothing to do and I surf the web. And it was something about being blessed. And what is blessed? I was wondering, what does blessed mean? You're blessed. Does that mean you'll live to 100? Does it mean you'll become filthy rich? Does it mean you'll never get sick? Does it mean every good thing you can possibly imagine will happen to you? So I went on to the popular Christian site Got Questions and I asked them, and I found out it means to experience the full impact of God's presence now and eternally. Experience the full impact. This is like a political thing, and I got to comment on political things right after this, but experience the full impact. What does that mean? If you look in the world, Christian, non-Christians, they all go through the exact same life changes, good stuff, bad stuff as, the non-Christians. So if you're blessed, it essentially means pretty much nothing. All right, so talk about political talk where you experience the full impact. Let's talk about a more political comment for someone running for office. And what do they promise? Change. People want change. I'm going to bring about change. And, as pathetic as it is that's your platform to bring change, which means nothing. Change can be good, change can be bad. But really what's ridiculous is when all the crowd starts cheering, yay, yay, change, what a bunch of idiots, right? It's all right. So a New York Times op-ed quoted Zelensky, didn't quote, they said that Zelensky is the new leader of the free world. And I thought, what? Who said that? What? Because you said that? Leader. What do you mean even leader? I mean, for a long time, the U.S. got spoken of as the leader of the free world. Not so much anymore. I mean, the Europeans certainly don't want to have so much to do with us anymore. Our results in this Iran war don't make us look so leadership anymore. But the thing is, what do you mean leader? Like everybody turns their head and looks, what should we do, leader? What should we do next? How should we behave? No, nobody does that. You know, a leader. And Zelensky, a leader? How do you get this? The smallest country out there, a leader. It's my comment on leaders. Now, here's something that's really personal to me. Beards. Now, I don't know about you. If you don't have a beard, you probably don't know this. But some people, including myself, they'll have a habit sometimes of pulling on the beard, kind of thoughtful like. Well, you don't know it, but sometimes you'll pull out a little hair. You don't even feel it. You don't even notice it. But these hairs, they can get stuck in your finger, and it hurts. And you wonder, how could a hair get stuck in there? And I wonder too, because it won't come out. I get a pair of tweezers. I have to pull them out. And these things are in like barbed hooks. It's like a bumblebee, you know, with those hookers, a stinger. It doesn't come out. It goes in, but it doesn't come out. I mean, not without ripping you to hell. And beard little hairs, they can do that. All right, so there's that interesting comment. All right, let's go on to something else. I was reading about pollution, water pollution, plastics in the ocean, and a company in particular, there's several out there, but this one was called Ocean Cleanup. And, you know, they're all just privately funded. You know, people donate to them. And they've got ships that go out and collect the plastics from the ocean. But another place where plastics come from that don't get nearly the attention they need, and actually in some sense more important, is rivers, because a lot of the plastic in the oceans comes from rivers that flow into the oceans. And as part of this little documentary on it, it noted that only 200 cities are responsible for the majority of plastics flowing down rivers into the ocean. On top of that, the plastics that don't come from the rivers, that are just dumped by ships into the oceans, are actually like fishing stuff, nets. Most of the plastic in the oceans that was deposited there is fishing equipment. Who knew, right? But there you go. So part of this story, I'm reading about Ocean Cleanup Company. They've got these really cool things where they put these nets on the rivers before they hit the sea, and they catch all this plastic. Of course, you got to wonder, all right, they got it. It's not in the ocean, but it's still going somewhere, right? It's going to go to a landfill. You know, what happens there? This part of the story, they kind of close up. Well, hey, the name, Ocean Cleanup, right? They're focused on the water. So they're doing what they do. All right, but one last thing I wanted to comment about that was the person talking about this, these river collection systems. There are different kinds, but he doesn't call them kinds. He says it comes in different flavors. This drives me crazy. I hear this all the time. You know, ice cream is flavors. You know, food is flavors. You know, machines that come in this kind and that kind are not a flavor. They're a kind. You can't say kind. We've had kind forever. Okay, there's my little rant on flavors. All right, what about recycled trash? As long as we're talking about trash, recycled trash. And this is just a quick little note. You know, there are places where you have recycle plants where all the trash goes in. And, you know, trash is supposed to be cycled in only certain kinds. You don't just throw anything into recycled trash. You got, you know, you got plastics, metals, glass, essentially is what it is, paper. And at any rate, since people don't observe that so well, they've got workers who will watch the trash come on a conveyor belt, and they'll pick out, that's not trash, that's not trash, that's not. I saw one who was terrible. A man heard a meow, you know, a cry. Someone, you know, threw their cat in a bag in a trash recycle thing. It was going to go into the crusher. Horrible people. But, you know, forget that story. I'm sorry I mentioned it. Sad story. I got another story about bunnies I can tell you later. Anyway, recycled trash. The persons were talking about, yeah, kind of things you see in recycled trash. You know, you'll never know what you'll find. You might find surfboards. You might find TVs. You might find hand grenades. What? Hand grenades? Yeah, I guess you'll find anything. All right, let's go to chapter 2. What do you mean chapter 2? Oh, I was just watching something, and it was a video of some kind, and it paused for a second and said Chapter 2. I'm thinking, what is Chapter 2? You know, what is Chapter 2? If you didn't tell me it was Chapter 2 and you just kept talking, would I be confused? Would I not know what's going on? Would I not be able to follow? And, you know, it just goes on to other separations, like paragraphs. You know, why do we have paragraphs? From what I understand, there was a time when there were no paragraphs. It was just one long written. Now, I'll say one thing about paragraphs. It helps you remember where you're located on a page. You know, if you happen to sneeze a second, or you say, "What's that, honey? I'll be right there," and you come back, you know, you get an idea of where you were. You know, got all these text on the page as just one long text. I have a hard time. But paragraphs, they separate ideas. You know, every sentence could be an idea. And anyway, so chapters, dumb, but you know, I guess I still like them. All right, last thing, chip manufacturing, Intel. You know, they make those chips, those computer chips. You know, Intel, as I understand, is not the big kid on the block anymore. There are a couple of other players, two in particular, that I had never heard of. Actually, one of them I had heard of. And I was very surprised that they were chip manufacturers, because they are Samsung. You know, they make appliances, make TVs, and they make chips. And they don't just make chips. They're like one of the big boys, along with another company called TSMC. And apparently Intel is down there number 3 now. I don't know if it's in terms of production, in terms of quality, in terms of cutting edge, but Intel is looking like a faded light to what it was, except that they're trying to break that with some new technology. What's the new technology? Well, you know, the idea with chips is they make them smaller and smaller and smaller. If they make them smaller, they can be faster, they can be more powerful, they can, you know, squeeze more into a single piece of plastic, and you know, get more done. It's greater, smaller, except it gets to a point where you can't get any smaller, because mostly they do this with lasers that, you know, cut little patterns into the boards. But these lasers, they can only get so fine. You can only squeeze them down with focusing to a certain point. In fact, they talk about the wavelength of light is the issue, and you can't get down there anymore. So in these sizes, they talk about them in nanos, and they were like 14 when I first started looking into the size of these things. Now they're down to like 4 or 3 nanometers, but it's getting impossible to get any deeper than that, except with this new technology called direct self-assembly, which is where they give these materials the idea, the pattern. Look, this is the pattern we want, you little munchkins, you, and we're going to put you onto this chip, and you're tinier than even these etches that we're trying to make, and you will just shape yourself into the design that we want. It's called directed self-assembly. And whereas we used to talk about nanometers, now we're talking about angstroms. I'm not sure what an angstrom is. I'm sure it's very small. And so this is the direction that they're going. I'm a science guy. I like science stuff. And so that's why I mentioned it. And so there, with that angstrom light competition. Oh, just by the way, Intel, yeah, they're investing in it. Samsung and TSMC, not so much. They're going to try and keep squeezing, even though they've already squeezed as far as they can, the current technology. Intel's going to try and push this new DSA, as it's called, and wait to see if they become the new kids on the block or not. I know you're all excited about that. I hope you liked, subscribed, and notified. I hope you come and watch me again. What's anybody last things? Oh yes, United Arab Emirates has decided to get out of OPEC. Everybody was talking about that, so I just had to mention it. It's got some impacts in terms of American petrodollar strength, and not much more than that. And the last thing, the assassination attempt on Trump, with half the people saying, it's all set up, and the other half people, trying to, say, oh, no, it was real. Who knows? At any rate, once again, take care, and I hope to see you again. Or I hope you see me again. Bye now.